Fighter jets, safety, cars, and no steering wheel. Combine these four things I've just said into one and you'll have a clusterfuck of things that make absolutely zero sense when bundled together. But at the same time, you'll realize exactly who or what I'm talking about here. That is what I'd call a reputation that precedes itself, but I've always been curious about it. On screen, you see me driving my car and it's pretty evident where I'm driving. Where I live, I guarantee you that 99% of the people do not know about Saab, and seeing one is quite a surprise. I always get excited when I see one on public roads, but like I said, I never understood Saab as a brand or the appeal, or the almost cult-like following they have to this day. I'm gonna name drop you in a good way, I'm Percy, but you've got one of the cleanest Saabs I've seen, and the way you and everyone else spoke about Saab just piqued my interest. So I've decided to research the curious case of Saab. To understand anything, you first have to look at its history because it gives you an understanding. Wow, the second coming of Shakespeare right here, people. What am I even writing? Saab started off with fighter jets and other planes during World War II, and they created some pretty interesting machines like
21,
17 and 18. Flawless naming routine they had going on. Wow. Then they created their first car, which looked a bit wonky and wasn't very practical, but they soon got the hang of things, being a somewhat niche brand until they dropped the 99 Turbo, their first cult classic. Someone over at Saab decided to smack a turbo in a family car during the late 70s, which is just, I mean, like, sure, whatever, thank you, because they invented a new genre of cars. Normal performance cars. Wait, no. Regular performance cars. Normal cars with more performance. No, performance sedan. This was the car that pretty much kickstarted it all for Saab, but at this rate, all I'm doing is recreating that Top Gear documentary, so time to steer away and into a building. No, actually, I want to stay here and explain something about Saab as they continue being a niche brand. Although the 99 was a cult classic, Saabs were known for one thing during pretty much their entire existence, and that was safety. These cars were unbelievably safe, and the 99 included. The structural integrity was astonishing, and that translated to real-world crash protection. This obsession of safety caught my attention, especially when it was mentioned that they crash tested it with a dummy moose. Dozens of people pass away as a result of moose crashes annually. That's because the way the moose is, their heavy bodies fall directly on the windshield, which crushes it, and thus the occupants. But to take that into account and design the safety of the cars so that doesn't happen is unbelievable. They really were not playing around. A lot of people bought Saabs for that obsession of safety they had, but at the same time, not a lot of people bought Saabs in the first place. However, simultaneously, the people who did buy Saabs were also some of the most educated around, according to Jeremy Clarkson, who, okay, might not be the best source at times.
Please may I use your lavatories? My scrotum is on fire.
But still, it's sad Saab drivers were among the most educated on the road. Very interesting, because the three Saabs I've seen where I live were all driven by dudes who looked identical to this. I am not joking, literally identical. So that's the history of Saab, or at least part one of it. I'll get into it more later, but now you've got the basis of a car brand that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but is so fascinating, and you almost want to make it make sense. What doesn't make sense is their car with no steering. The Prometheus prototype, where you control the car with a joystick, the same type you'd find in a fighter jet, and yeah, well, I'm sure the bells are ringing. The 105 and Draken influences coming to a car is kinda amazing. However, that wasn't the only weird fighter jet thing they had going on. The night panel, for example, blocked everything else and only displayed the speedometer, like something you'd get in a fighter jet. I've seen mixed opinions on its practicality, with some calling it a gimmick and others saying it helps on roads when it's nighttime. So putting all of this together like a massive puzzle, we can come to the conclusion that Saab is one of those if you know type of brands. If you know what I mean. The way they operated and their obsession with making cars that were good meant that they didn't appeal to everyone. In fact, they appealed to very few. That was when they were still around, because for some odd reason, I've noticed more people talk about Saabs now than before, even though they stopped making cars over a decade ago. I guess it could easily be chalked up as an internet thing. Still, something I wanted to point out, along with the simple fact, they failed as a car company. Well, at least fundamentally, a car company succeeds as it continues making cars and making a profit, but Saab didn't make a profit and now don't make cars. So technically they did fail, but not entirely. When General Motors bailed them out, it is said they injected cash and tried to make the brand more profitable, but Saab still refused to make cars they didn't deem good enough. Call it arrogance or something else, but I honestly believe this was a true enthusiast company, a car company that genuinely only cared about their cars and how they would be in the hands of their customers. Terrible for business, but wonderful if you really want a nice car. I guess that's what drove people to Saab and still continues to drive them in a way. They only failed because they were reluctant, or some would say outright refused, to give up their own unique way of making cars. And that's what gets me, because I genuinely believe that they were, in a way, ahead of their time. These same characteristics I speak of now, safety, build quality, the desire to actually make their cars good, is exactly what people like me, car enthusiasts, are looking for today. I guarantee you, if they would have somehow continued and not gone under, they would have seen their sales go up coming into the 2020s, for sure. I find that quite tragic, honestly. They are what we need today, when they are not around, but not what we needed when they were around. Crazy how the world works. Now, Saab isn't that entirely, they still make the Gripen, but a bit out of my price range, but if you've got $85 million to spare, knock yourself out. Like I said, if they got into making cars today with their same philosophy, you'd see more people buying them. Doesn't mean they'd be profitable though. What a lamentable thing to have a car brand that seriously prioritized their customers and making their cars how they wanted and didn't give in to corporate greed cease to exist. Especially when today, those very things would have been deeply cherished, even more so than they were before. They made some seriously great cars, you know. The 99 Turbo was just one example. The 9.3 always caught my fancy. The Sport Combi. Sport Combi was their way of saying wagon, by the way. Just look at this. Making wagons. God, they were so cool. 90% of their ideas were weird, but a few ideas were genius and they played a pivotal role in the car industry. In a way, they influenced cars more than you could imagine just by snapping in a turbo. Headlight wipers were made by Saab. That's pretty cool. Heated seats were made by Saab. Not that I need them where I live. Ventilated seats, on the other hand, that's good. Window defroster. I could go on, to be honest. Kinda strange how I'm feeling a bit sad making this video, even though I've never owned a Saab. I've barely even seen any Saabs on the load. Oh my god. I've barely seen any Saabs on the road, let alone drive one. Oh my god, I can't speak to that. It's just because I truly like car companies that do what they want to do and make cars how they want to make them without giving into whatever trend or bullshit that's going on at the time. But at the same time, if you do that, you'll probably not make any money, which you really gotta do, you know? Tell me all about it. I made $0 from this video and the ones prior in this month because YouTube had the bright idea of demonetizing one of my channels and decided I, as a real human, should only have AI bots review my appeal. Of course it got rejected, it's so dumb. If you can, please tag Team YouTube on my X post as I'm currently battling the coming of Skynet and saving you from a grim future. No, but seriously, help a brother out here. I'll see you soon.